Welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about the bones of the upper appendicular and talk about the structure and their features and landmarks, all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. Keep in mind that the upper appendicular skeleton is not just the bones of your arms, but it also includes your shoulder girdle. So that's going to be your scapula and your clavicle. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start with the scapula. Right here. This here's our scapula. And first off, the way that you can figure out which actual side you're looking at, all this wonkiness is lateral. The smooth part is anterior. So that means that this is smooth and it's where, so this is the front, this is where your arm would be coming off of. So this is a right scapula, okay? Lovely. All right, let's talk about its pieces. First off, the higher extension here, get my pointer, is the acromion process. And just below it, we have our, can we see that? Coracoid process, right? This smooth region here is our glenoid fossa. The glenoid fossa is going to be where the head of the humerus is going to rest against. Sometimes you see it as the glenoid cavity, but personally cavity to me is referring to this region in general. So if I am asking you about this particular feature of the bone itself, I would prefer you use the term fossa. From there, this portion of the scapula is our, don't know why my mind is blanking, is our superior border, okay? From there, we have our lateral border. Remember, the glenoid is suggesting that this is the lateral side, so this is our lateral border. We have our inferior angle and our medial border, okay? The smooth region that is the anterior of the scapula is going to be the subscapular fossa. And fossa is just referring to like a smooth area. Let's go ahead and take a look at the posterior side. This is a dead giveaway that you're looking at the back. This is the scapular spine. And think about it as in your own spine as your back. This is saying this is the back of the scapula. So this is our scapular spine. And, bless you. Really? Oh, hang on. Pause. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. So again, this is our scapular spine. The region above our scapular spine, or supra because it's above, this is our supraspinous fossa. And then below, we're going to have our infraspinous fossa. So infra, below the spine, supra, above the spine. Okay? I believe that's it for the scapula. Let me just double check my notes here. Yep, looks good. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the clavicle. First off, if you look at it, the thicker end is the sternal end. This is what's going to connect at the clavicular notch of the sternum. And the flatter end is our acromial end. And the acromial end is going to kind of line up with the acromion process of our scapula. And then lastly, if you look at the acromial end, you're going to have this bump here, right here. And this is our conoid tubercle. The conoid tubercle is going to be on the inferior side. So you're going to want to use this to figure out, am I looking at a right clavicle or a left clavicle? So seeing as it's pointing up, that means I've got it upside down right now. So this is going to be the correct orientation. From there, I'm going to look for the sternal notch. And I'm going to make sure that the sternal notch is facing the medial side. So like if I were to do this, it would be medial. However, from the sternal end, it needs to curve in the anterior direction. So right now I'm holding it incorrectly. If I turn so that it's on my left, you can now see that I've got the sternal end. It is going to, sorry, this is really strange. It's going to curve in the anterior direction, and then it's going to end at the acromial end. Okay, so like this. So that's how you can figure out left and right. Let's go ahead and move on to the humerus. First thing, easiest thing to figure out with the humerus is the head, right? And the direction that the head is pointing is going to be your medial side because the head is going to fit up against the glenoid fossa. From there, from the head, you then have this region here. Our models have this nice little ridge. This is going to be our anatomical neck. It's not just the neck because we actually have two necks on the humerus. We've got our anatomical neck, which is resting directly against the head, but then we also have the surgical neck, which is essentially the top of the shaft and starting to the epiphysis, the proximal epiphysis. So again, we've got our anatomical neck and our surgical neck. From there, we have two tubercles. Okay, we've got the greater tubercle, it's much larger and it's a little higher up. And then we have our lesser, which is a bit smaller than the greater. Okay, so the greater is also a little higher up. I think I might have said that. And larger, and then this here is our lesser. From there, in between our tubercles, we have our intertubercular groove. Hopefully you can see that okay. This region in between the tubercles. And that's actually it for the top of it. Let's go ahead and talk about the rest of this here. Our models aren't too great with the deltoid tuberosity, to be perfectly honest with you. It's about in this region. It's probably not something I'm going to test you on. I just want you to know its general vicinity. All right. Let's go ahead and look at the bottoms of the, or just the bottom of the humerus. So first off, we've got our supracondylar ridges right here and right here. Okay. We then have our lateral epicondyle over here. The medial is on the same side as the head because remember the head is medial, so this is going to be our medial epicondyle. The other thing is that the medial is much more pronounced than the lateral is. As you can see, the lateral is kind of itty-bitty compared to this protrusion of the medial epicondyle. On the side of the medial epicondyle, we then have the trochlea, and then on the opposite side, we have the capitulum. Okay, so medial, epicondyle, trochlea, capitulum, and lateral epicondyle. And then if we turn to the posterior side, hint, hint, this guy here is telling you it's posterior. This is the glenoid, ignore me. This is the olecranon fossa. The olecranon is what's going to give you space for the olecranon process to fold into as you extend your elbow. So now that we've talked about the olecranon fossa, let's go ahead and talk about the ulna, which is going to connect to this region. So the ulna is super simple to figure out because it has a U shape in it, U for ulna. And if we look at it from the anterior view, so it's kind of like a hook looking at you, maybe. The top part is what's going to be our olecranon process. And the olecranon process is the pointy part of your elbow, and it's also what's going to fold up in, well, not fold, but it's going to move up into the olecranon fossa when you extend your arm straight. From there, this notch that's been taken out is the trochlear notch. And then below it, we have the coronoid process. Not the coronoid process of the mandible, but the coronoid process of the ulna. All right. From there, we've got this nice little notch taken out, the radial notch. This is where the head of the radius is going to rest. And then we've got this, let me turn it lateral here for you. We've got this little section here, which is going to be our tuberosity of the ulna. If we look at the bottom of it, we then have the head and the styloid process. So very similar to the styloid process in the skull, it is pointy. And even though it's opposite of what you would think, just remember that the head is opposite of you. I don't know. Let's go ahead and talk about the ulna's best friend, the radius. It's going to fit against it like so. This portion is the head. So after talking about this earlier, some of us came up with the thought that because they are such good friends, they can't butt heads, and that's why their heads are on opposite ends. So the head of the radius is up here, while the head of the ulna is down here. If it works, it works. The radius also has a styloid process, this pointy part, and it also has a little notch taken out, which is going to be our ulnar notch. So the ulna is going to fit right in there. What happens when we move our palm up and down, also known as pronation, supination, the radius is actually kind of rotating around the ulna. And then the top of the ulna, top of the radius, we then have the radial tuberosity, and again, the head of the radius. Where the two line up, so they fit together like this, the region in between them, okay, there's actually going to be a membrane between them, and where that membrane attaches is going to be our interosseous margin. A lot of our diagrams show kind of like a grain to the bone for you to be able to see it. On our models, they're actually very smooth, and you're not really going to be able to see kind of a difference in that region. But what I do want you to know is that the region between the radius and ulna, that space normally has a membrane. So just know that the bone, the bone regions that are facing one another are going to be considered our interosseous margin. There we go. All right, last one for upper appendicular is going to be the hand. So right now you're looking at posterior. I'm going to flip it so that we're looking at anterior. So this is the palm, Right, so that means that we have a right hand, and the fingers are our phalanges, or if we're just talking about one, it's a phalanx. We start by counting with the thumb. The thumb is also known as the pollex. So we have our pollex, which is 1. We then have phalanx 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then the portions of our phalanges, we've got the distal, middle, and proximal. For the thumb, we don't have a middle, so it's just going to be distal and proximal. So where your knuckles are, we then move on to our metacarpals. Again, going from pollex to pinky, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we have the head, shaft, and base. Now, the last bit about the hand is going to be the 8 carpals. They're kind of tight together, so once you can figure out you don't have to do that right now. Once you figure out, personally, I go for the scaphoid because it's larger. And it kind of starts on the thumb side, but it's down. The saying is straight line to pinky. Straight line to pinky. Here comes the thumb. So let's go over these. For straight, we have the scaphoid. Line is going to be lunate. 2 is going to be triquetrum. And hopefully you can see it. This little pea-sized bone is going to be our pisiform. Can you stop that? Buford. From the pisiform, we then say, here comes the thumb. So here is going to be our hamate. Comes is going to be the capitulum. The is going to be trapezoid. And the last one, the last T that stands for thumb is going to be trapezium, and trapezium, thumb, you can associate those with one another. So once you can find the scaphoid, which is the largest here, and it's the most proximal from the thumb side, you can kind of figure out the rest of the carpal bones. All right? So that is it for the upper appendicular. You good? All right.